One, two, one, two. Welcome back. Okay, this film that I'm going to make today is so narrow casting. To actually, for you to understand it, for anybody to watch it, you have to actually fulfill various boxes as a viewer. You have to have been alive in the United Kingdom in the 1950s and watched industrial films. If this was a film on BBC 4, it would be put out at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I think what I'm about to talk about today is fascinating. And I'm calling it They've Never Had It So Good. Now, you've all heard that phrase, and it's often, if not almost always, misinterpreted. It's used by TV, media, in newspapers to talk about an era of Britain post-war where things positive were happening. Oh, no, it wasn't. In fact, the phrase, "they've never had it so good," was a piece of Harold Macmillan talking at a colonial rally in Bedford, and he was talking about the plebs, the workers, the poor people who he believed, after many years of struggling due to his party, now never had it so good. It was an incredibly patronizing comment, but it's a fantastic statement, and it really stuck, and it was used probably totally against what he originally meant, and it's come to represent an era of post-war rebuilding in the United Kingdom that the country desperately needed and probably has never happened again. And that's not what this film's about. Well, it is and it isn't. I told you this was very, very narrow casting. Most of my films are watched by two men and a dog. This film will be watched by half a man and one dog's back leg. But if you are an avid and keen viewer of the Professor Simon channel, hi, welcome, thank you for sticking with me, because I think you're going to find this subject fascinating. So what's it about? Well, it's about Edgar Anstey. Who? Edgar Anstey. You've seen his name. You've seen his name everywhere, and you don't probably know who Edgar is. I'm going to tell you today, and I'm going to tell you a fascinating story about the reconstruction of Britain in the 1950s and 60s, and how really it was just a fantasy image built by Edgar. In my opinion, one of the most influential documentary makers in Britain of all time. And here is a taster of some of his work.
We are testing new engines of revolutionary design. We are teaching new methods, whether in the loco works or in the refreshment room. We are using more mechanical devices to get jobs done quicker. We're putting up new buildings to improve the service we give.
The films all had titles like Pushing Forward, The White Heat of Industry, Striving Ahead, fascinating stuff, and portraying a picture of Britain, post-war Britain, that nobody had really seen before. Now let me dive back into my YouTube obscurity and actually tell you what Edgar Anstey's role was in all of this. He didn't direct any of those films. He produced them. And to understand that, you have to know what a film producer does in Britain. So we have this image of a Hollywood film producer who makes a fortune putting money into a film and becoming a fat cat. Edgar Anstey was a British documentary producer. He was hired by companies like British Rail, ICI, British Transport Films to make films, which he then hired the director, the camera person, the editor person, and oversaw the project. He probably was in charge of the budget, but the budget was set. So he didn't want to make a loss, but he certainly didn't make a profit. So who was Edgar and how did he change the face of Britain? Well, he did it with film, beautifully, highly crafted, unbelievably well made, but fantasy documentaries about an emerging Britain post-World War II. A Britain where ICI chemicals carrying DDT to the colonies were seen as heroes. A Britain where swathes of the home counties were covered in concrete to build new motorways. A Britain where the old was knocked down to reveal a horrible post-war architecture of the Stevenage shopping centre. Very much a Britain of moving on, the end of steam power and the birth of diesel electric locomotives. And it works. They are beautiful, nostalgic, fantastical portraits of the United Kingdom in the late 50s and early 60s. But Edgar was a man stuck in time. He absolutely hated the cinema verite, the realistic kitchen sink documentary, on the shoulder, gritty reality documentary. His films were pre-scripted, beautifully shot on 35mm film, fantastic editing, specially composed music to get across a single message. And by the end of Edgar Anstey's career, the world had moved on. Television programs like World in Action, Panorama were showing the gritty reality of colonial Britain, the decay in the inner cities. That was not why you hired Edgar Anstey to produce your film. So, are you still here? So, are you still watching? I hope so, but I'm sorry this is very, very narrowcast to you men and women from Britain who lived in that era. But today I'm going to revel in some of Edgar Anstey's best moments from cinema because I personally love them, although I know they don't represent a true picture of Britain coming out of post-World War II. And they're a halcyon days, salad days fantasy of what Britain might have become, but didn't. So sit back in your English armchair, get your cup of lukewarm beer or tea, dip in a rich tea biscuit, and watch these clips from Edgar Anstey's best films.
Just about 150 years ago, Britain invented the steam engine. Out of its possibilities grew much of British industry and a new method of transport which was to spread over most of the world. But its very success gave men the impetus and the wherewithal to search for other forms of power. And as time went on, they found them. Now, by comparison, steam was found wanting. Wanting, too, was the costly staff needed to maintain the engines, for technical progress had gradually turned men's interest to more advanced machinery. And so into the melting pot went the metals and materials of the steam age.
Out of the melting pot came a brand new electric railway, using a 25,000-volt supply straight from the national grid.
This is somewhere. It might be anywhere in England. And it's Monday morning. It might be any Monday morning.
I know you're disappointed, Signor Martinelli. I'm more than disappointed. What can we do? You don't want to exhibit the machine with a notice saying out of order, do you? Even if we did get it going today, it's too late to get it there in time now. Too bad, but there it is. Goodbye, Signor Martinelli. It really is a great pity, the new machine not being ready in time for Milan. The Italian agent's moaning his head off. Says his stand at the fair will be like La Scala without a prima donna.
Here it's our job to maintain the vigorous life of the Scottish countryside by road services and to convey to the crofter and the fisherman all that they may require.
Down in Argyllshire's far south, Campbelltown is the terminal of the Argyll group of British road services. The fishing town lies sheltered in its sound from the Atlantic beyond, surrounded by the rich farms and the small crofts of Kintyre, the wind-swept fertile valleys, and the livestock that is their wealth. Glasgow must supply all that Argyllshire cannot produce for itself, all that miraculous assembly of the everyday which the 20th century consumes. In the past, the stagecoach and the dray worked the route to Campbelltown, then the contractors, and now the regular timetable trunk services that leave for the west for day and night. Our transport depot at Campbelltown is tucked away behind the main street. Long ago it used to be a distillery, and it's important still today. Standing in the depot, watching the flow of goods in and out, you can trace from the things they send and receive the pattern and the life of the people. Every commodity you could mention finds its way here sooner or later. A needle, an anchor, a plough, a wedding dress. Local deliveries to town and villages go on all the time. The red lorries are everywhere in Kintyre, and everyone knows them because everyone depends on them.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed those, because I certainly did. And it's very easy to criticise Edgar Anstey for his overly optimistic view of Great Britain after World War II forging ahead, and why he didn't encompass the modern gritty reality of documentaries. But I think he deserves a place in history. I think his films do reflect an optimism that Britain could have had. And I think most of all, Edgar Anstey respected skill and individual humans. Everybody in his films is treated amazingly. He absolutely respects what they're offering to a greater society. A fantastic guy. The truth is out there.